Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi mining community, welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Simon Finnis, who's the managing director of McLaren, a company that's been making waves in the critical minerals space since its recent listing. McLaren is advancing its titanium project in Western Australia. Titanium isn't always the first mineral that comes to mining conversations around critical resources, but its application and strategic importance are growing rapidly. With McLaren positioned right in the middle of that evolution, Simon is here today to share the insights into the company's progress, the broader titanium market, how technology, community engagement and smarter strategy are shaping their journey. Simon, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Good to be here. Thanks, Rob. Technology is amazing, isn't it? We're on different sides of the world, but we're having a good chat.
Yeah, certainly. And as we always start these podcasts off, I just wonder if you could just tell us about yourself, about your career, how you got into the mining industry, how your career's sort of grown from maybe 20, 30 years ago to what it is today. So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, sure. I guess I fell into it, really. I left school, I did a year of geology at uni and wasn't sticking, really. I wasn't enjoying myself, and I managed to get a job at a mine. I was growing up in Adelaide. I got a job on a mine in the Northern Territory, which is sort of 600 kilometres north of Alice Springs. So you can imagine it was hot, different. And look, for me, it was just a huge growing up experience, and I absolutely loved it. I've loved mining. I've been in mining ever since. So that was when I was 19. And I'm not telling you how old I am now, but needless to say, it's more than three. I've been more than 3 decades in mining. And I've worked all around Australia and I've worked in Africa, so I've been really lucky. The family's travelled with me everywhere except Africa. And probably the last 15 years, I've moved into project development roles. Started off in the early 2000s in like a project manager type role. Moved into sort of C-suite roles and developed mineral sands projects, but also other mining projects. We developed the bauxite project in Queensland in 2018, or started production in 2018. And I've been very lucky to be involved in reopening of the CSA copper mine in the late thousands, with Mount Lyell mine in Tassie in 95. And we did the Pooncarie Mineral Sands project in early 2000, sort of 2001, 2005, or 2006, I think we started that. And I was in Africa from 2012, 2015, so building a big mineral sands project. So it's sort of been building things which I enjoy. It's exciting. And this is probably no different. You know, we saw this project in August last year. We recognised that the market in mineral sands space has changed over the last 5 to 10 years. And we saw an opportunity for this project. So we're very keen to have McLaren in the stable, and we're looking forward to publishing the PFS and getting on with it.
So obviously McLaren Minerals has moved quickly since listing. For those listeners that don't know much about the company or the assets, I just wondered if you just give us an overview of the company.
Yeah, this company was listed as a silica sand company. And we introduced this project to it last year, and subsequently changed the name to McLaren in late 2024. So it's a new project for the company, but the company's been around for 3 or 4 years. We've obviously put in some management, and we've helped them move into a different direction. And now the McLaren project is the main game for obviously McLaren Minerals. That's a great name. You can either talk about red wine, or we can talk about Formula One racing. We can talk about the McLaren Mineral Sands project.
Certainly. And I suppose jumping on the fundamentals, and again, wonder if you can just provide some insights for our listeners who might not be aware of obviously titanium projects. Can you provide some insights for the uses of titanium, the processing applications needed, and I suppose anything else that you can provide an overview for in particular with this critical mineral?
Yeah, sure. Titanium is a key word. Everyone links that to the metal, but the metal is a very, very small part of the market, but it's obviously a key part. Titanium metal is light, it's non-corrosive, so it's fantastic for replacement of body parts, but it's also fantastic for aerospace and other applications where you need light, strong metal. But the majority of the mineral sands, the mineral suite that we see in mineral sands are what we call titanium dioxide products, or TiO2 products. And they go into paints, majority, so it's made into pigment, which is pure TiO2. And there's different grades of minerals in the suite, but it goes into paint. About 50% of the market, of pigment market, goes into paint. So obviously when the world's growing, the mineral sands market, the TiO2 market, the pigment market is growing, but it also goes into plastics, paper, just about anything you see around you that needs colour or has colour attached to it, has TiO2 in it. Even the substrate of medical products has TiO2 in it, because obviously if you take for instance a Panadol, you've got a tiny amount of actual medicine in that tablet, and the substrate needs to go into your body, then dissolve so the medicine can be effective. Part of that substrate is TiO2, which is inert and obviously just passes straight through you. So it's a pretty interesting market. It's changed over the last 5 to 10 years in that, there used to be a very strong market in the higher TiO2 products. So to give you some idea, we start off with what's known as sulfate ilmenite, which is our product. It's the lowest TiO2 bearing product in the suite, and then it moves up into chloride ilmenite, what's known as high Ti, which is higher titanium, leucoxene, and then rutile. And rutile is naturally occurring high grade TiO2, maybe 95% TiO2. But there's not a lot of those higher products, and there's a lot of the lower end products. So with the advent of the revolution in China, really, they developed a massive sulfate ilmenite industry because it's actually easier technology than the chloride process. But now they've also started a chloride, or they have over the number of years started a chloride ilmenite process. So those ilmenites go into a processing plant. The sulfate plant is basically an acid leach, sulfuric acid, and the chloride uses chlorine gas. So lots of nasties in the chlorine side, not many in the sulfate side. But the sulfate ilmenite's always been a poor cousin, but that's really changing. When I was in Africa, we produced an awful lot of sulfate ilmenite, and we would sell it for between $75 and $85 a ton. Current market for sulfate ilmenite is between $320 and $350 a ton. So it's a huge change. And one of the reasons for that change is that the Middle East and in China are building lots of ilmenite smelters. They have obviously cheap energy, and sulfate ilmenite, the other main component of that product is iron. So you put the sand into the smelter, you tap off the iron, then you tap off the TiO2. The TiO2 is a slag, and the iron is called pig iron. But through that, you actually get two revenue streams. Whereas if you put into a sulfate pigment plant, you get the TiO2, but the iron just goes into a waste, so into a tail. So it's starting to create a different value for sulfate ilmenite, and we're seeing that now in the market and the very, very strong demand. So we're very comfortable with, I guess, where we sit in that market. I mean, if I'd looked at this project 10 years ago, I would have said sulfate ilmenite, not worth anything, leave it where it is. But the project itself has got lots of benefits. Are you happy for me just to roll into the project? So the project itself, it's a big ore body. So we've got a 280 million tonne inferred plus indicated resource. It's at 4.8% heavy mineral, which is a very good grade in today's world. The indicated portion of that is about 80 million tonnes at nearly 6%. So we've got a very nice ore body. It's sort of deep and easy to mine, obviously, because it's sand. It's got very little overburden on top, anywhere between 0 and half a metre, so there's almost nothing to do before you get to the ore. We're sitting on a major highway. We're sitting 350 kilometres from a deep water port in Western Australia. We're in Western Australia, another very strong positive in the world of mining. And look, so this project has a lot of attributes that are very positive that people don't really recognise, because I guess they've seen that it's sulphate ilmenite, and they recognise that it's at the lower end of the value. But all those other attributes, including that when we build our plant, it'll be very, very simple, because it's only a sulphate ilmenite plant. It's very simple to separate this from the other grains of sand, which is all mineral sands mines really do. We don't process, we don't grind, we don't crush, we don't do any of those things. We just separate the grains of sand. So this will be a very simple plant, which means moderate capital and modest operating costs. So we're very comfortable. I guess people will start to see that when the PFS comes out in about a month.
As you mentioned, obviously titanium isn't often a first critical mineral people think of. And I'm not sure if I had anyone on here speak about titanium. But how do you see its role evolving in the broader critical minerals space? And where does McLaren fit in with that picture?
Look, I must admit I'm not 100% au fait with the critical mineral space. I must admit I'm very old school mineral sands guy, but where we see our product going is into that smelting area, because our product is plus 90% TiO2 plus iron. So if you put 90 tonnes or 100 tonnes of this product into a smelter, you get 90 tonnes of saleable product. That's very valuable. So we see that as a huge advantage. And then the slag, the TiO2 titanium slag, will go into another process where they will create the pigment, the TiO2, and from there it's distributed into the other manufacturing areas, whether that's metal, whether it's aerospace, etc., etc. So we're sort of I guess, like Australia's very, very good at and very used to being, we're a bit of a quarry, and we'll send it off for someone to add the value. But I guess what we're seeing is that we'll also fit quite neatly into the market, and we'll also make a lot of money.
Obviously, you mentioned the projects in Western Australia, and obviously very pro-mining jurisdiction. What are some of the biggest permitting, environmental, even community engagement issues you've actually encountered so far, and how are you sort of navigating through them?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, we've been doing this a long time, and I must say it doesn't get any easier. So it is a process, particularly in Western Australia, where you do the work and you'll get the reward. Obviously, we've got to do a bunch of environmental studies, flora and fauna, baseline studies. We need to do, emission studies. We need to do an environmental impact study. So all of those things take time and money. But we are lucky in that the area is not, it's not the Daintree rainforest. It is in the middle of Western Australia, in a very arid area. Saline water abounds and not a lot of fresh water, so there's just not a lot of fauna, and the flora is pretty benign. That being said, we'll do all the studies. If we find anything that's got value, we'll put in place management plans to manage all those things. But we're not anticipating any huge issues. This is not a part of the world that anyone really goes to. It's not a tourist attraction, and it's far enough off the highway that we won't get any tourists. So, look, we think from that perspective, it's a great little project. We recognise we've got to do the work. We recognise that we'll always do the right thing, but we're not anticipating any huge issues.
Obviously, technology and innovation are becoming more important in exploration nowadays. What tools or techniques are you using on site that are helping you make better decisions and even faster decisions?
Look, the biggest step forward we've made in this phase of drilling, and bearing in mind that there was a lot of drilling done before we became involved that we weren't involved with, so it's very hard to get a handle on things. But we've got a very good geologist who has now recognised basically the method of deposition of this material, and that's important because it helps us to estimate where other material might be. And there's a very interesting correlation between relative levels, so the height or the non-height of the mineral. And what we're seeing is that it all sits above a particular RL. So it's all been deposited at a particular time and above a particular RL. So that helps us then to look for extensions. And in fact, we've gone back through the old data, and that, this thing will be bigger. There's no doubt. The drilling we've done recently shows us it will extend it to the north. It shows us we'll extend it to the west as well, and probably to the east. So I've just about covered all points of the compass there, but we're not using particularly modern techniques. We are using real exploration techniques. We've looked at a bit of geophysics to see whether or not that can give us any guidance, but it's very difficult to see any correlation. But we are using that to help us find water in paleo channels and so on. So that's been quite useful, and we managed to drill into water in the last campaign. So there's a few little techniques there, but it's a pretty boring type of mining and exploration phase. It's hard work, and it's and basically doing the work and getting an understanding of how the material was deposited in the first place.
Going back to the project, you recently announced that you've reduced the project risk through validation of slimes management strategy. Firstly, I just wondered if you can just tell us a little bit about the metallurgical process and the test work program completed, and also secondly, what were the findings from the test work program?
Sure, and I'll start off by just explaining what slimes are, because a lot of people don't actually know what they are either, and they're really just finer grains. They may be silt, but they might also be sand. But in our case, we are basically using a cut of 38 microns, which is very small. But what we find is that the slimes can coat the grains, and that can disrupt the separation process. So what as I mentioned before, we're just trying to separate the grains by their physical properties, whether it's weight, magnetic, whether they can accept or whether they're magnetic or not. But usually gravity is the main way we separate. And what we find in those later processes, if the grains are covered in a coating of clay, they don't separate properly. So initially you've got to take the slimes out, and we've successfully shown that we can do that just with very tried and true methodology, hydrocyclones and a thickener. And the second problem with slimes is you've got to return that material to the mining void, and you can't just do that in a lump of slurry because it just turns into a slushy mess. You've got to do what we call co-disposal, and you co-dispose it with the sand tail, and you use flocculants to take the water out, and then you mix it with the tails, and then you put it back in the hole. So that test work was multi-pronged in that we tested the ability to remove the slimes up the front and thicken it, and we also tested the ability to co-dispose of that slimes in the void. And on both counts, we showed that it was easily doable with well-known flocculants and traditional methodology. So very, very comfortable that even though historically our slimes at about 25% is high, we can manage it, and it'll be dealt with as part of the process.
What's been the most unexpected operational challenges or learnings so far since you've been on site, and how do you address those challenges or issues?
Look, we actually haven't found too many surprises. We've done a few of these projects before, so I guess we're looking for those surprises. We were worried at the start that we didn't have any water, but we found lots of water, so we're very comfortable with that. We were obviously worried about the slimes, but we've proven by way of that test work that we can manage the slimes. There is it's funny, and I sort of start introducing this concept to people because I think people are starting to understand, but if your head grade of your mineral sand, of the sand, is say 6%, and you take 25% slimes out, the grade of your ore going into your plant increases. So it goes up by whatever amount of slimes you've taken out. So if it's 6, it might go up to 8.5%. So that becomes a high-grade mineral sands project. So it's sort of counterintuitive, but it does show you why we're confident, and it does show you why this will be quite a small plant, and you can manage it because it is higher grade than the normal sort of mineral sands project that's bouncing around at the moment. The other couple of positives, we found some gypsum on site, and we planning to use gypsum as a clarifier in the process. So you add it at the very front into your water. So if that proves to be a resource that we can use, that'll be a fantastic option from the point of view of operating costs, but also from a local business point of view. It'd be good to get a local business in there to do that for us and deliver it to us on site. So it's actually on the same tenements as the mineral sands. So very interesting area geologically.
Looking beyond McLaren's own operations, what's your strategic outlook for the obviously critical minerals space over the sort of next 3 to 5 years, and how does that shape your exploration strategy and obviously the business?
Yeah, well, there have been a couple of mine closures recently in sort of the sulfate ilmenite space, so there is room for our product in the market. Like a lot of things, we've seen a period of growth, and now we're in this period of inflation that seems to be stabilising. So, I guess we're seeing the market being flat for the next few years, but then after that we would see the market grow again. And mineral sands, or the pigment market, over the last 20 years has grown 3.5% a year on year. So after a couple of years of flat, we anticipate the market just growing, going back into that trend that we've seen before. And obviously a lot of that's driven by the urbanisation of China, which continues, and urbanisation of other parts of the world, India, etc.
Yeah. I just wanted you to just tell us, obviously you're in Western Australia and we've got an international audience. What's the industry like in Western Australia this year? And I suppose, what do you expect, how the industry is going to change maybe over the next sort of year or two within Western Australia? Because I know sometimes they have their own little market there compared to the rest of Australia.
Yeah, well, the southwest of Western Australia is very well known as a mineral sands part of the world. There's two what we call dry plants or mineral separation plants in Bunbury, which is southwest of WA. There is a couple of chemical plants as well, where they used to manufacture what they called synthetic rutile, which is a leached ilmenite product. So you put in the front end of that plant an ilmenite, and out the back end of the plant, after an acid leach, you would get what they call a synthetic rutile, or a higher grade TiO2 product. So the southwest of WA has been a very large mineral sands sort of province, I guess, for a very long time. Another one north of Perth, of course, around Eneabba, which is where Luca are building their rare earths plant, and obviously part of the feed for that plant will come out of tailings out of the mineral sands industry that is operating there, but also historically that has been there. So, it's a pretty interesting market and mining area. It's not actually well known in Australia that there's been lots of mineral sands mining. I mean, first mineral sands was done in New South Wales at a beach called Iluka, which is why Iluka called themselves that. Historically we used to dredge beaches and take the mineral sands out of them. Stradbroke Island in Queensland had a big mineral sands mine right in the middle of it. People used to drive out there and go tourism, didn't even know the mine was there. So it's a very interesting industry, and that people don't really understand it and people don't really know it's there.
And what's next for McLaren Minerals, and what should shareholders be looking out for from obviously a news flow perspective for the remainder of this year going into next year?
Yeah, we're about halfway, or we've received about half of our assays from our recent drilling program, so they'll keep rolling in. We're anticipating them, really based on the geological interpretation we did when we were drilling, that will just support the resource. We anticipate that being positive, and after that we'll do a mineral resource update, and we're obviously hoping to increase the resource both in size and confidence. And after that we will publish the pre-feasibility study, which will be the first time anyone's done enough work on this thing to actually talk about what the financial outcomes might be of a project, what the capital cost would be, what the operation cost would be, how you would operate it, etc., etc. And look, that's coming together very nicely. Our engineering group, IHC Mining, have done a great job, and I saw the first fly through of the plant the other day, and it's starting to look really good. You know, it's holding together. The project will work. We just need to finish the job and get the numbers out there, and then people will start to understand.
Right. And lastly, I suppose more on a personal note, obviously you've been in the mining industry for a long time, as you've mentioned in the introduction. What's one lesson from your career that you wish you probably should have learned earlier? And how does that guide your decisions today in what you're, obviously what you're doing with McLaren?
Look, I think the main one is that you've actually just got to do the work. You can't not do the test work that we've done and then expect things to work. You can't not drill and then try and understand the ore body. You know, you've actually just got to do the work. And as I said, I guess that's a huge lesson that, the one certain thing about, the pre-work we're doing now and the feasibility and the next feasibility we'll do, should this one prove positive, which obviously we think it will, is that things change as you go along and you find different things, and you've got to move around a little bit and change your mind on a couple of things. I guess what we're very comfortable with about McLaren is that it's just so straightforward. People cruelly say my name and say the word simple in the same line, and of course that's not a negative when you're talking about mining projects, because simple makes cheap and makes money. So that's what we're very keen on about this project. But look, you've got to do the work. You've got to make sure you dot the I's and cross your T's. And look, you've got to do everything the right way. In this modern world, there's just no way to go around it. It's not the right way to go around it. You've got to keep your stakeholders informed. You've got to keep them up to date, and you've got to make sure everyone's happy. So, we're focused on that. We've got pretty good community support. We'll do the right thing, and I think everyone understands that we will.
Yeah. Simon, appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on, sharing your story, telling us obviously about McLaren Minerals, tell us about the titanium market, and obviously what the uses are for titanium, which is obviously important, critical mineral that is needed, as you've alluded to. So if our audience wants to reach out to you, if they want to follow your story, which obviously I encourage them to follow your story, how can they go about doing that, and what social media platform channels are you on?
Yeah, obviously our website's the main source of information, but we also keep all the socials up to date, LinkedIn. I think we're probably even on Facebook, even though I don't do Facebook. You can tell by how old I am that I don't do Facebook, but someone does that for me and they're very good at it. So we keep all that up to date. But the easiest way is probably to jump on the website, register for the email updates, and you'll get all the updates, all the ASX announcements, all the presentations, all that'll come into your inbox, and you can fire questions at me should you so wish.
Yeah, no worries. We'll include those in the show notes accompanying this for easy access. So, Simon, thank you again. Perhaps you can come on next year and give us an update on the project sometime next year.
That'll be good. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thank you. Hope you enjoyed the episode. As always, appreciate your continued support. Please keep sharing these episodes far and wide. And obviously we've been speaking about a commodity I don't think we've had on the podcast in over 560 or 70 episodes, so titanium. So appreciate if you can share this, because what we want to do is educate the mining industry globally. So thank you again, and until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes, and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.